Hello, everyone. I'm Ernie Humphrey, the CEO of Treasury Webinars. I would like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us for our webinar today, Remote Cash Management and Risk Mitigation, Navigating the Coronavirus Effectively. First and foremost, I hope everyone and your families are safe and healthy, and I want to express my sincere gratitude to all of you who have friends and family on the front lines of fighting the coronavirus, and I know I can speak the same from my webinar partner today, TIS. I'm honored to have TIS as a longtime strategic partner, and their strong commitment to thought leadership helps us make this webinar possible today, in addition to their strong commitment to serving the Treasury profession. Every company is dealing with a bit of disruptions as Treasury professionals are working remotely. What does this mean for cash management and payments fraud mitigation? How can Treasury professionals effectively manage cash and the additional risk exposures associated with a remote Treasury workforce? Today, you will discover how to leverage technology to maintain control of your cash conversion cycle, understand the risk exposures created with managing cash remotely, and maintain effective relationships with your Treasury service providers in the midst of a global pandemic. Before we delve into the content, I'm going to offer a few quick words about Treasury webinars, cover a few housekeeping items, and then cover our learning objectives as they offer the pillars of our value proposition for you for investing an hour of your valuable time with us. And finally, I'm going to introduce my esteemed co-speaker for today's webinar, John Paquette. At Treasury Webinars, we offer webinars designed to empower Treasury, accounts payable, and accounts receivable success at companies of all sizes across all industries. We only do what we do best, virtual events. Now for the exciting housekeeping items. Those of you interested in receiving CTP credits for today's webinar, you'll have to answer all of our polling questions today, remain on for the duration of the webinar, and answer our short survey, which will launch immediately following the conclusion of the webinar today. If you have any questions regarding CTP credits or would like a copy of today's presentation, please send an email to ernie@treasurywebinars.com. Again, that's ernie@treasurywebinars.com. We'd love to hear from you today, and you can ask your questions at any time in the Q&A panel of your go-to webinar control panel. Hopefully we'll have time for the Q&A session, but we have a lot of content to get to as we've been constantly updating the content actually this morning in terms of what we're seeing from survey results relative to Treasury sentiments in the coronavirus. And finally, I appreciate everyone's consideration in taking a short survey at the end of the webinar today, as we always strive to improve the ROI we offer our event attendees for their valuable time. Now, what are our learning objectives today? We'd like you to understand the current and emerging sentiments of Treasury leaders in the midst of the global pandemic today. I'll share some research from a weekly survey that's being done by the Treasury Coalition, a lot of great companies that serve the Treasury profession, including TIS and Treasury webinars as well. I want you to understand how to redefine business as usual in their new remote reality. That's my term. I love that. I don't like new normal. I say next normal, but it's really this remote reality. And as all of you are well aware, we're in the midst of this. But unfortunately, I think there's little doubt that as we go back out in the economy, I think people are going to get a little bit overzealous, and then we're going to have to go back to this remote reality that we're in. So it's really important that we understand business as usual, and we don't want to view this as a one-off white swan event. So let's take this opportunity to really put our business continuity plans in actions, right? So this is like the test that we probably weren't ready for, and we'll talk about that in our survey results. And then maybe most importantly, I'd like you to be able to identify specific opportunities to improve the value delivered by Treasury by leveraging the right technology in the next normal. A couple other objectives that we have, especially with everything that's going on, everybody's probably a little bit on edge a little bit. So we're going to have a few more objectives today. We want to make you smile. I know that's hard on a webinar, but those of you who knows me, hopefully I've made you smile before. And even better than that, I hope to make you laugh as well. The other thing is that we really want you to take an action as a result of spending your time with us today. So whether that action is reaching out to a colleague, setting up a Zoom meeting, connecting with myself or John on LinkedIn, or just thinking, right? Think and take an action, right? That's what a valuable webinar is all about. And if we haven't done that, then we failed, and please let me know. Before I get too carried away and go to the content, I want to make sure I welcome my esteemed co-speaker to the webinar, John Paquette. John is a senior finance expert with TIS. In his role, he assists clients and prospective clients in finding the best use of technology that TIS offers to solve their organizational challenge, which are now evolving on a daily basis. Prior to joining TIS, he held various finance and treasury positions in U.S.-based organizations. Most recently, Senior Director Treasury for a large healthcare organization that I have worked with in the past. John holds a BA in economics from Merrimack College. So you have two econ majors on the call today, so beware. And John also holds an MBA from the Carroll School of Management at Boston College. John, it's a pleasure to have you as my webinar partner again today. Welcome to the webinar.
Thanks very much, Ernie. Thanks for having me.
All right, our pleasure. I just want to also note that just like the last time John and I did a webinar, we're going to be having more of an interactive conversation. And so John and I have both been in the Treasury profession a long time, and we both have tremendous networks. So we're really going to make this more conversational. And so we're going to try and get to all the content. If we don't, fear not. So our agenda, how are we going to accomplish those objectives? You're like, wow, those are pretty lofty objectives. We're going to talk about the coronavirus and Treasury, what that means, but also what it means for you in general, right? As a Treasury professional, as any professional, and how to work remotely, and also how to manage folks remotely. That's something that's completely new to a lot of people. We're going to talk about the coronavirus and risk exposures, and then we're going to dive into some tremendous survey results. Again, the weekly survey that's been going on for several weeks. The Treasury Coalition was formed by a good friend of mine, Craig Jeffrey, a strategic treasurer, and it's been amazing to see a lot of us put our shoulders behind it, and then some of the results that we're seeing and trends, and helping us look forward and then understand what's coming down the road. So if you haven't taken the weekly survey, we have a link there, so we'd love to get your insights. We have, I think the past week we were up to 700 folks that actually took the survey, and it's really across the globe. And for me as a former Treasury practitioner, it makes me feel better having a sense of what's going on. I'm not alone. What are other people doing and seeing, and what do others see as the biggest challenges? And maybe they see something different than I do, and I need to put my eye in a different area. And then of course we want to share with you how to deliver value from Treasury. And what we'll do is we'll take a look. John and I think I've reviewed these with my TIS webinar partners in the past. What does it mean to deliver value in Treasury, right? And how has that changed, right, after our new remote reality? So let me go ahead. I know you guys are all itching for a polling question. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the polling question. I want to level set a little bit for John and I as we have our conversation and kind of delve into technology. Just asking you to share with us how you would characterize the Treasury technology. Just tell the truth, right? We're not going to tell on you. Is it basic, primarily Excel? Would you say intermediate, Excel bank platform, use an Excel bank platform and ERP module? Or do you have like an advanced? Do you have a treasury management system? Or maybe in addition a TMS or other cloud applications, right? There's a lot of applications out there in the cloud, AP, AR, and payments. I want to remind any of you interested in receiving CTP credits for today's webinar, you are going to have to answer all the polling questions here today. So John and I have a lot to talk about. So let's go ahead and leave the polling question up for another 5 or 10 seconds. I'm going to give you the 5-second warning. I know sometimes you have a little lag in that polling, registering your vote. So I'm going to give you the countdown because I really miss sports. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, let's go ahead. I'm going to close that polling question. One last chance. All right, we're still voting. All right, thank you everyone so much for taking the time to do that. And so looks like we have the winner, or the most answers is 53% intermediate Excel. That's about what I expected. I am pleasantly surprised to see that we've got 31% of you in the advanced category, right? You've got that TMS. You're probably managing Treasury and leveraging the cloud, which really opens up a lot of doors and really helps us function in the remote reality. And don't worry, if you're still in basic and Excel, this is actually a good time for you in order to really upgrade, believe it or not. And we're happy to talk about that with you offline. John, is there anything in here that kind of sticks out to you, or any comments that you'd like to make here?
No, I think this is in line with what we're seeing in the market as well. Most people seem to fall into that intermediate category where they have, at least some technology that they're able to leverage during these challenging times here as well. Like you said, it's good to see that, below 20% are in that basic primary Excel category there. As I have to imagine things can be quite challenging for that category. But, as you mentioned, we have some helpful points to point out here today. So, so happy to discuss those as well.
Hey, John, let me just ask you a question here as I'm kind of thinking as we're looking at the polling question results. Now, I know this is all confidential, so don't worry. I'm just trying to, so with some of my other technology providers in the cloud space, they've said that they've had a few people who have really been really surprised, right, by the remote reality and been a little bit nervous, and right. And so, are you seeing that you're having prospects reach out more and realize they have big issues and needing to speed up that implementation? Are you seeing that yet, or do you think it's still a wait and see on that?
I think we definitely are, particularly because I think most organizations have fell into this business continuity process for a lot longer than they would have typically tested or really planned
Right.
for, right? So I think they're really recognizing technology shortfalls that are making day-to-day processes very, very challenging. A lot of organizations are, processing payments manually,
Right.
have really almost gone from that gatekeeper, treasurer type role to a processor, just trying to keep pace with day-to-day business, keep the wheels moving, so to speak here. So I think it's definitely put the thoughts in individuals' mind and spark conversations
Right.
on our end.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll talk about this much later, but yeah, it really gets your challenge becomes more prevalent when you have international payments as well. And I think a lot of people have been caught off guard a little bit. And the thing that's going on right now is if you had any issues, right, with manual process or workflows, all of a sudden remote reality, bam, those are just magnified. And so the cost of trying to do business as usual is raised like 20-fold. And some folks have some pretty significant risk exposures that they weren't expecting. And like you mentioned, John, a lot of folks, their continuity plan was maybe a week, right? And now we're probably into the months. And like I mentioned earlier, I think that we're going to all get back out, but we're all going to be more of that shelter in place. And I wish that wasn't true, but I think that's part of the next normal. The good news is we'll all be ready next time, right? So let's talk about the coronavirus and Treasury. And so, here's a couple things. And I've been doing a lot of blogs about the remote reality finance focus, but also some more general professional development things. So every company has challenges in managing a remote workforce, right? So you're not alone. So you need to kind of accept those. And I'm sure you've been going through this, but let's make sure that we document those, right? And let's make sure that we address these challenges, right? This isn't a temporary thing. And then you really need to understand the impacts of a remote workforce on all your processes, right? AP, AR, risk management, right? So we need to really understand those and address those. A couple of things that I think are tremendously important. Understand the consequences that coronavirus will have on your suppliers, your customers, your banks, and your service providers. So we need to be proactive, right, on all fronts. I'm especially seeing issues on the accounts receivable side, but let's be honest, right? The cash forecasting things are going out of the water now. But during a crisis is the time when relationships are built. Everybody's really happy when everything's hunky dorky, but um, when this happens, this is when you forge those relationships. So let's be honest. Let's call all these different parties and ask them what we can do for them. And then we need to understand the consequences, right? This new next normal will have on our treasury success metrics, right? It just might not be possible to meet our cash forecasting goals, meet our liquidity rules, meet our DSO, DPO. So we need to understand that. John, let me bring you in here. What are your thoughts, especially on maybe understanding the consequences on those relationships?
Yeah, no, I think it's absolutely critical to understand those relationships. Access to liquidity is a key concern for all organizations right now. So really understanding, any levers you really have to pull there, and really having good relationships with all your partners are just going to make things all that much more easy for you to get through these challenging times, I think.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and just kind of a little bit more, a lot of the good things that John and his company do, they really enable visibility. And so, especially with your banks, right, we need to have that visibility, and we need to be proactive in those communications, and we need to have efficient payment processes, right? So I'm sure we'll talk about that more later, but it's really important to communicate with your banks. We'll also talk about this a little later. And so I was seeing in a few surveys how banks were once again pulling away from credit lines, and then someone also mentioned to me. Actually, I was doing a podcast episode with Craig Jeffrey yesterday, and I said, Craig, I'm hearing noise, right, that people are having issues with liquidity. And Craig said, well, what I found out was that the committed lines, the banks are supporting those, but those uncommitted lines were going back to 2008. So I just wanted to point that out because I thought that was really interesting, and it was great to be able to bounce that off of Craig. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at some more things that we want to keep. And this is a little bit more in general, right, is being a good business partner and adding value to your company. You need to communicate more with your employees. So if you manage a team, you don't want to communicate less, you want to communicate more. And of course, with the right risk controls in place, you need to do things like Zoom meetings. Zoom is now my favorite thing ever. I actually did a webinar on Zoom. I don't know if I'm ready to convert yet because some companies are blocking Zoom, but it's really important to get that video camera on face to face. You need to identify ways to keep your employees engaged. So you need to find ways to do that. Some of the cool things that I've been doing and involved with, we have these fitness challenges. Guess whose office this is? Guess whose dog this is? Maybe you have some sort of virtual happy hour, maybe karaoke. And so you have to think outside the box. Again, you want to communicate more with all your business partners. And here's something: you need to control the type and tone of communications with suppliers, customers, banks, and service providers. Again, everybody is a little bit on edge, including myself, I will confess. And so you need to be really careful, especially on the AR side, right? Because a lot of the AR impacts people can't control, in a sense, how they're getting paid. So let's be careful that we take control. And my mantra is the first communication I always endeavor to start out with: are you safe and healthy? Right? I mean, that's just, I wish you did that all the time, but I think that's incredibly important. And then we need to find ways to keep our providers engaged, right? And our business partners. So how do we do that? How do we reach out to them? Let's get on the phone and ask them, is there anything, how are you? How's your business? Is there anything that I can do for you? This is actually a way to find how to offer more value to your suppliers. And then this is incredibly important as well, that I don't think I've seen talked about in blogs or anything else, and shame on me as well. You need to rely on your expectations with your boss, with your staff colleagues, with your suppliers, your customers, banks, service providers. We're all adjusting to what's going on in this next normal. And so let's realign. So let's all communicate so that we're not having issues, right? The world is what it is in a sense. And so, John, let me bring you back in here. Is there any bullet point or two that sticks out to you, or any color that you want to add from what you've been seeing so far?
Yeah, no, I think that this communication aspect is critical here too. You know, as you move to the remote environment, obviously you have a different way of managing staff, communicating with your internal colleagues, external providers, and service partners and things too. So keeping good lines of communication, making sure everybody's in the loop on everything is, we've seen, it's really been a critical thing for organizations to have right now.
All right, so I know everyone is tired of hearing me talk, and they want John to talk more. So, John, I'm going to go ahead and let you lead us on the next few slides.
All right, I appreciate that. Yeah, and just some different process aspects to think through here as we get used to this new remote reality, as you call it. Really, some of the key ones that we're seeing in the industry as well. Obviously one critical one is the payment process, one of the most critical processes for organizations. And what we're seeing is a lot of organizations that even have really secure payment processes in place now, they're rooted in straight through processing, where payment files are really moving from the back office to the banks without any really manual intervention or opportunity for those files to be manipulated. Those organizations are now moving to this remote reality here, and having to adopt their payment processes to something that's totally abnormal, right? So what we're hearing is a lot more organizations are needing to use e-banking tools for file uploads, even manually keying payments and things like that. Even supporting documentation and payment approvals are being passed more commonly through email forms, and even sort of maintaining a normalized workflow for payments, what payments need to go out, who's in the queue to approve those payments, has become really challenging for organizations. So, I think I alluded to this before, but, it seems like treasurers in a lot of senses are moving from just the monitors, the gatekeepers of the processes, really keeping things under control, to actually being the processors themselves and really just trying to keep business moving as normal. And, obviously these abnormal times bring about a lot of fraud risk. The fraudsters are obviously very aware that, all these organizations are moving to these abnormal processes and looking to exploit any sort of vulnerabilities here, really. So we're seeing an uptick in business email compromise attempts and different fraud attempts like that. So we're, cautioning organizations to be vigilant, be cautious of those aspects as well. As we move to the next slide here, another critical process that I think, is really impacting organizations is, and Ernie, you alluded to this as well, is it seems like, the chief concern amongst most organizations right now is liquidity, access to liquidity, and then obviously Treasury's role in that is to provide the cash visibility really needed to keep an eye on that liquidity. Likewise, it seems like, pressure on AR collections, access to credit lines, company compliance issues, and things like that are really coming into focus. CFOs are asking really more questions than ever of the Treasury team around cash flow, cash visibility, cash forecasting, and it seems like a lot of organizations are having a tougher and tougher time answering those questions just because of these remote work environments, right? So not having access to the same systems, disunified processes, individuals spread out geographically in different locations who aren't able to access certain inputs and information that they need. Is really having a big impact on the timeline and the quality of the cash forecasting for a lot of organizations. And I think what we've seen, from the organizations who are moving through this in the most concise way, and really, a strategy for organizations moving away, are the benefits of the cloud, right? Moving to more of an environment that's rooted in the cloud, where all the data is accessible to all individuals within your organization across the world. That bank connectivity is in place there through the cloud, facilitating both the payment file transmissions and the statement file collections, right? So. And that way, organizations who have moved in that direction seem to be able to keep the closest eye over their cash flow and keep their payment processes the most normalized. And I think it'll be a key point for a lot of organizations to consider moving away from these work from home conditions here. Just to move to the next slide here, we have just a little bit of data here in terms of some of the risk exposures that have emerged as a result of the virus. Obviously, like we mentioned, the fraudsters are out there. They're looking to take advantage of any opportunity they have to exploit this situation. So, you can see the uptick in coronavirus domain registrations really right after the virus started to take hold here, indicating that, there are individuals out there looking to take advantage of this situation. Likewise, the emergence of a lot of coronavirus impersonating apps, apps that pretend to provide information around the virus, but are really malicious and stealing information from individuals. And then phishing attempts, right, seem to be all over the place right now in terms of, emails that are coming out pretending to display information that's informational and, helping to provide information on security measures and things like that too, but really having a malicious context here as well. Likewise, if we move to the other, I think we even have one more example here of a phishing attempt. I think a lot of these seem obvious to most individuals in terms of, okay, just hit the delete button here on this. But, obviously, if the fraudsters weren't gaining a lot of traction, they wouldn't continue to use this method here. So, I think this is where the communication aspect really comes into play. And it's important, within the organization to communicate how the organization itself will communicate news about the virus or certain actions that the organization is taking related to the virus. So that educational aspect here is obviously very, very critical in helping employees avoid these fraud attempts here.
Yeah, no, John, that's fantastic. Just to dovetail on that a little bit, what John mentioned, it's absolutely critical that you reach out to all your employees, maybe an all-employee meeting, and just tell them you have to have your radar up on many levels. One scam that I've seen, components of the scam are that they just flood someone's inbox, right, with a bunch of things so they don't see that approval going on. So you really need to reinforce to folks, what they open, what they don't open. And so, as John mentioned, that this is almost a dream, right, for the fraudsters. So everyone is kind of off their guard a little bit. And so it's really, really important that we're vigilant and re-educate our folks, reinforce our best practices to make sure that we aren't hit with fraud. And as John well knows, a lot of times it takes a long time, right, for you to even realize that you've been compromised. So we need to be more careful than others. So let's go ahead and shift a little bit to coronavirus sentiments. Again, I mentioned the survey put on by the Treasury Coalition. It's called the Global Crisis Monitor. And so it's really done a fantastic job of looking at, right, the sentiments and how things are changing and evolving. And so as you see, we've got several companies. That's probably one of the good things I've seen about the coronavirus. We had collaboration. So we all serve the Treasury profession. All of these companies are amazing, right? And then what you'll see is this coalition is growing. See, I wasn't on here to begin with. And so it's really, I hope we can really dovetail off this and collaborate to serve the profession. And so this requires thought leadership. So again, I know everyone's like, stop blowing Craig Jeffrey's horn, but he's actually done an amazing job because I've been trying to do this for many years. So Strategic Treasurer, kudos to you, Craig, and your team, and also to TIS for having the the insight to really be one of the first ones on here. So what we see the first week, right? We had 200 global responses. That's pretty solid, right? This is a little surprising to me. People initially saw the government's response as positive, right? We started to see payment security caution. I guess they should have had more caution. Only 1 in 5 had adapted. And then here's where we started to see the AR alarm go off. And this is what would have freaked me out in cash forecasting. And so I think as this is drawn out, people are starting to see that this is becoming more and more of an issue. And again, I think communication with our customers can really help us get a handle on what that impact will be and how we can respond to it. The top level concerns, again, safety protocols, as John mentioned earlier, the BCP completeness, right? Business continuity plan. How do they extend? And then we had access to liquidity. John, in taking a quick peek here at the first week, is there anything that you thought is surprising or something that you expected to see right out of the gate that we didn't see?
Yeah, I remember the one thing that really jumped out to me when these results were first presented was that payment security piece, that only 1 in 5 organizations had really adapted their payment security or their payment process for work from home arrangements. Obviously that's extremely low. I think everybody, all the providers were expecting that to be a little bit higher than it was. And hopefully we see that number, has grown through the weeks as well.
Yeah, great. So let's go ahead and pivot to the next week. And so what we've seen on the top line, right? We went from 200 to 300 different organizations. Just as in week 1, we saw that in general, the companies were happy with the central bank liquidity, of course. Any of you out there that have small businesses or like, I don't still know if I'm not happy with that yet. And this was, I like this impact. Cross training, right? That was kind of the new thing, right? Everyone was focused on cross training, building that bench. Hopefully we were doing that before this all started to kick in, but that's a positive impact. And then, of course, we had the AR, right? Concerns, some of the safe level concerns, adequate liquidity started to rise, and direct financial impact of business attention is shifting away from BCP completeness. John, anything stick out to you here at all?
Yeah, I think that trend, in the AR alarm, as it's noted here, in terms of organizations having concern over AR, looking back to my time in the treasury management space, not having that collectability on those receivables or that consistent cash flow, have to imagine that's putting quite a strain on most organizations right now. So it's obviously a key concern here, an important thing to note in these survey results.
Right. Now let's pivot to let's go to week 3. And so our top level concerns, I would have expected this a little bit sooner. Maybe that's because I've been working from home for a long time. Now we started to see working from home issues. I think people realized that we weren't going to be able to get back to work, right, as soon as we all thought. So now everyone's like, really thinking we need to have, so we not only need to train people how to work from home, we have to be able to train people how to manage remotely. And that's a difficult task. So that there's an art to that. So if you haven't done this, you haven't seen it from your company, I would strongly urge you to reach out and see if you have any information on that. Are you sharing that, right, with your employees, best practices? I mean, you have to be wired a certain way to really thrive in working from home. And some people need to be coached, and there's nothing wrong with that. And some people just don't belong in a cubicle like me. And then we saw trust training and business continuity plans. And then what we started to see here is that we asked people, when are we gonna have financial normalcy, right? And now this has creeped up already to 8 months, and I think it's going to keep going and going. We saw remote from home, but then we also saw escalating concerns, right, in our loan covenants, because now, especially if you're a net borrower and you're kind of a little bit highly leveraged, these things are a concern of you here. John, anything really stick out to you here?
Yeah, I thought these results were interesting because we started getting a lot of insight into what the home office situation kind of looked like for a lot of individuals as we got into this week 3 survey results here. So, obviously moving to the home office has challenges and just getting used to working remotely, and then for the managerial staff to really, get used to how to assign and manage and monitor employee responsibilities remotely. Right. So you could see there was a definite learning curve there for individuals, and likewise you started to see some trends emerge here in terms of companies noting that they had inadequate access to systems and data that they would usually have from the on-premise environment here as well. So I thought those results were really interesting.
Okay, well, before I do the group polling question, I'm going to do a one-person polling question to John. I know John was in corporate treasury a long time, and John was probably in the office And so, John, let me ask you, what have you found to be the most challenging issues in working from home more frequently and now all the time?
Yeah, so I think that for me, it's the access to data, access to systems and data type item here. Obviously organizations are getting better and better at this, I
Right.
think, through the use of cloud technology and, remote access type applications and things like that too. But not being in the office, not having access to all the normal programs, all the normal data that you would, was always a particularly challenging thing to me. I don't think we ever really moved to a business continuity type situation for more than a few days. So, moving into it for the length of time that most of the people on the phone probably have at this point must be immensely challenging.
Right. Thanks, John. And as you probably already noted, I have launched our next polling question. Asked you to share with me what your biggest concern. I could have had more options, but for me, what I'm seeing is communication issues, data security, and then the technology infrastructure issues. And again, these concerns may be evolving, right, from week to week. So appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions here today. We're not seeing quite as many people vote as quickly, so I'm going to go ahead and leave this polling question up for 10 or 15 more seconds because I want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to help us out in looking at some benchmarking data. Again, I appreciate everyone's consideration. Just take a moment and click that button for me. And then those of you who are interested in receiving CTP credits, you're going to need to answer all of our polling questions. So again, I missed my sports, John. I'm going to do the 5-second countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to cheat. I'll give you like 5 more seconds. All right, there we go. We want to get over 80%. There we go. All right, awesome. Thank you, everyone. Let's go ahead and take a quick peek. I think if I would have asked this question a few weeks ago, I might have expected to see more in the technology side. But now that most of us have been home for a while, I think this is about what I expected on communication issues, and we probably would have seen more data security issues. John, do you have any thoughts here?
Yeah, no, I think that this is, in line. It's nice to see that the technology issues are, 25% around along that time frame or, percentage there. But, the communication issues, obviously, I think a lot of treasury organizations or finance organizations, like to be in the office, like to have that constant communication and be able to work collaboratively in that way too. So I can certainly see why organizations or individuals are claiming that as to be a, top concern here.
Right. Thanks, John. So let's go ahead and keep moving through. To me, when I was a practitioner, this is the fascinating piece. So I hope everyone else finds the survey results as compelling as I do. So you'll we'll really start to see some traction here. We hope this week, for the week of the 8th through the 15th, we had over 500 respondents. Right now, we're starting to see the cash conversion cycle. What about accounts payable delays? Now we're looking to, and if we're going to do that, right? Let's let people know. So let's be a good customer. We expect people to be a good customer. Let's be a good customer ourselves, right? And then are we there yet? Of course. And then AR went from 5 times to 10 times. So people are starting to panic a little bit, in my opinion. We saw the normalcy go out to 9 months, and we're starting to see more people a little bit not as comfortable with their liquidity. And so to me, I was glad to see where we have our AP radar on. This is incredibly message from me. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Right? We all have accounts payable. We have to think of the other side of the coin, and let's build relationships, right? And so, being a good what happens if there's a supply disruption, which it is right now? Do you want to really have a bad relationship, right? Do you want to go from paying in 10 days to paying in 3 months without any notification? I don't think that's a good a good way to manage your relationship. John, anything stick out to you here from this week's results?
Yeah, I think that you hit the trend perfectly. It seemed like, everything sort of came into focus here with organizations really recognizing the AR slowdowns quite a bit, seeing the corresponding, impact on organizations extending out their payables and things like that too, and the overall liquidity impact getting a little bit worse here, organizations thinking it's going to take a little bit longer to get back to normal here, but yeah, overall these trends I think sort of really showed the escalation here of the situation.
Yeah, I think we started to see the transition from not a little bit of shock and kind of seeing what's going on, and now starting to feel the impact, right? So people had no idea what the impact is. So as you get out, right, as we hit right that last month then, which is the end of April, and this week we're coming out. Now we're starting to see, we might have had a little bit of delay. Now we're like, oh wow, we had, our DSO just went off the charts, right? I was expecting it to bounce back if I did a rolling 30-day look back. And so this slide, I love this slide. And so all the survey results are on treasurycoalition.com. Forgot to note that. Again, if you want a copy of the slides, please just reach out to me after the webinar. And so Craig Jeffrey did a webinar of his own, like the whole hour, and went over some of the results. And this slide, this is the slide to me that's probably my favorite slide that I'm going to share for the survey. And so we really get all these concerns, and then we see how this trend is evolving week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. I'm not really surprised, but it's good to see that we're going in the right direction, right? Week 4, safety protocols, staff awareness plans, right? And then I would expect this one to go this way, but maybe the financial impact on business, I'd expect this one to go, another month we're going to go over here. So John, anything here, any of these arrows or trends stick out to you at all?
Yeah, so the BCP completeness, obviously, it's ticking up a little bit, it looks like, at least there, as organizations are getting used to working from home, but still obviously a long way to go to get that full level of comfort there. Yeah. And then, access to liquidity kind of, continue to be more and more of a concern and a challenge for organizations too. You can see that trend as well here.
I think what else we're starting to see, which is good, is people are starting to realize that they need to communicate more with their staffs, right? So we're seeing safety protocols and awareness plans. And so I didn't want it to take that long, but I think everyone is getting on board with the fact that we have to communicate and also have to learn new ways to communicate and engage, right? For Treasury and Finance, we're not known for being social. So it's maybe probably a little bit even more challenging, or maybe it makes you feel more comfortable in that remote environment. But nowadays, I guess everyone can kind of hide in their office, but there's Zoom, so Zoom, because you can't shut your office door. So this is the most recent survey results, which I just added earlier this morning. And so this is from the week of ending the 21st. Now we're up to 600, right? Where did we start? Maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. We started at 200. And so now we're starting to see a little bit more macro concerns. What's the unemployment? What's the GDP? So what's this going to happen for our country, right? Finance matters and medical. And so this is a question I asked Craig Jeffrey yesterday from Strategic Treasury. What do you think is, if you had a couple things that you could say to all Treasury and finance leaders, what would that be? And he mentioned, pay attention to the medical side, right? You care about medical because of your family, right, and your friends, but that's going to be the impact on your workers as well, right? How do we make sure that we are communicating with them, right? How to stay safe? Do we want to try and implement a policy, right? You can't watch people, but let's tell people what we'd like them to do and support them in every way possible, right? And then of course AR just kind of went off the charts, and then we started to see a little bit more focus, I think, on your company liquidity and people looking at their bank relationships a little bit. John, anything stick out to you from this past week's results?
Yeah, I think, like you mentioned, organizations thinking about that medical aspect, how to keep their people, safe, really with their most important aspect, whether they're in the office or out of the office, and keeping the organization moving along here. So it's good to see that. And then it's also good to see the liquidity trend reverse a little bit here, at least. Maybe organizations are finding solutions to that problem and, getting more adequate access to liquidity too.
All right. Thanks, John. So I love this slide as well. So this is really, Craig has really started to put out this framework on how to add value in the midst of this next normal. And so I love this. So these are specific things that you can do, right? To control, right? What you want to do is you want to take much control. What you're doing is you're redefining business as usual, right? So first is monitor, right? Make sure we're tracking even more laser focus on cash, accounts receivable, sales. Watch your industries, right? The actions, the thinking, the surveys. Invest 5 minutes, right? By taking the survey, right? Why not? I mean, it's cool. It's cool stuff. And you'll start to see it, and you'll proactively get the results, and you'll get information on webinars and podcasts and things that really make you feel plugged in. Staff and working from home, you want to reach out to staff, right, on a systematic basis. And I would say at least once a week, maybe twice a week. And I think I'm on Zoom every day with some of my colleagues. You want to cross train. You want to help people look at their work-life balance. And then that's why I think you should actually look to invest in technology now. how do we make our folks more productive? How do we make sure that they're staying active, right? What is the position of where they're at in general? Give them tips on how to do so. And as John mentioned, security, right? Our payment process are different. We need to redo our training on payment security, right? There's probably a lot of those risks that we talked about. And then communication and systems. I mean, this is probably for me, visibility, right? And then also on the professional development side, build out your connections. Now's a good time. Talk with your creditors and key suppliers. See, Craig and I are actually on the same page. And then ensure access works now, right? Raise your voice if it still isn't fixed. And so again, monitor staff and work from home, security, communication, and systems. John, you have anything to add here? I think I'm going to erect a statue, right, of Craig for this, but I think this is really compelling to me.
Yeah, no, this is interesting stuff for sure. And, we'll always sort of lean to the security measures here in terms of having a secure payment process at home. But think about how, security is impacted by these abnormal situations or really enacting your business continuity process in any way. And, how do you secure that process fully? And likewise, some of these staff productivity, cross-training, really keeping staff productive and making sure you have adequate resource coverage for all your most important processes is a great recommendation as well.
All right. Yeah, I'm gonna warn you. We're gonna clip through some slides pretty quickly here because I really wanted to dive in to the survey results. And in going through the survey results, I think we've really hit on a lot of these points already. On right, how do you deliver success pre and post COVID-19? So let's go ahead and as many of you well know, I like to talk about how to deliver Treasury success. Right. Pre-COVID, we have to define Treasury success. Post-COVID, we might need to redefine what that looks like. Right. Let's look at our metrics. You need to understand the skills of your Treasury team. Those might be evolving, right, in the new remote reality. Identify the skills gaps. Here's what we all have been talking about. Identify your technology skills gaps and understand, right, your current systems as well. Then we want to understand the time spent on non-value add activities, right? Hopefully we did this before, but now we're going to have that opportunity again. You want to assess your relationships with your internal customers, right, internally and your external Treasury partners. Let's be proactive and communicate. We want to collaborate with AP and AR, right? As John mentioned with me as well. Let's look what does that cash forecast look like? How are we going to communicate? How can we be a good customer? How can we be supportive of our customers, right? And the flip side of that on the AR side. So you need to invest in relationships right now, right? Internally, within and beyond Treasury, externally. So now is the time. If you want to have a conversation about that, I'll limit it to like 15 minutes or so, but I'm happy to speak with you after that. So let's go ahead. And I know all of you are just not having a good time unless you have more polling questions. So I'm going to go ahead and ask a polling question. And so I want to hit back on technology a little bit. Why don't you share with us your opinion? Do you believe your Treasury team has the technology we need to own your cash conversion cycle? I want you to think of that as right now, right? Your answer might have been different before we started to see the impact of the coronavirus. So just trying to get a sense and level set as John and I kind of clip through some technology related items that we want to touch on. Again, if you'd like a copy of today's presentation, more than happy to send that to you. And again, if we don't get to your questions during the webinar, John and I will be reaching out with you after the webinar. You also have the opportunity to request to be connected with John after the webinar. And so John has a tremendous amount of experience as a practitioner and now more in the technology space. So it's a tremendous opportunity to tap John's knowledge. So please take advantage of that opportunity. Let's go ahead and close the polling question. Let's go ahead and take a quick peek. I'm at the results. I apologize if I clipped that too early. Just send me an email if you didn't get a chance to answer it. And if you're really worried about your CTP credits, we'll take care of that for you. So we have 14% strongly agree, 53% agree. I'm actually happy to see that we've got 2/3 of the folks in here. 18% you don't agree, 11% oh, you know what's coming, don't know, you know what might find out, right? That's really important. And so if you disagree, right, so hopefully we've given you some opportunities and made you think that this might actually be the right time, right, to do that. John, let me bring you in here real quick. Is there anything that sticks out to you here?
Yeah, I think it's great to see 2/3 as agree or strongly agree in terms of this question here too, but obviously still a third here that falls in that disagree category. Like you've pointed out a few times, I think collaboration between the different departments, Treasury, AP, AR is critical here as, you know, obviously the full cash conversion cycle impacts cash flow forecasting, and AR collections impact AP in abnormal situations like this today. So, you know, it's an important topic to make sure you have covered. You have that good collaboration, then really the technology to facilitate that collaboration is key.
Thanks, John. And just kind of dovetail off that. So if you have a little bit of what I consider technological immaturity, right? Whether you're at that basic or medium space, you're not alone, right? And so again, these concerns were just magnified, right, by the remote reality we're now in. So before, really last year, before the crisis even thought about taking hold, we see that a lot of teams are overloaded and strained, right? And they're excited about tech, but that lag in adoption, guess what? That lag better go down. So just some interesting results. And again, if you want the copy of the presentation, you got the hyperlink there. And then again, we're going to see this, post, we're not going to see this lag. And hopefully we're going to see less teams that are strained and overburdened as we take this opportunity. And then just some, you know, the following technology will be relevant. I expect when we see another survey from PwC, we're going to see these things are important. Data analytics and RPA and AI are going to get more of a look. I'm just not really sold on blockchain yet. So John, anything stand out to you on the past few slides?
Yeah, I mean, this slide in particular, you know, data analytics, obviously providers are collecting a lot of information for treasury departments here, you know, in terms of integrating with their banks and collecting all this data. So I think that there's a big focus right now on you know, providers actually providing a good amount of analytics around that data and really key insights to treasury organizations as well. So no surprise there that that's really, you know, the most highly relevant topic on this survey.
All right, thanks, John. So let's just talk a little bit. We'll turn Dr. Phil on you. Assessing relationships and do a pre and post. So you got to look at your internal customers, right? Is it the C-suite, HR, accounting, sales, marketing, FP&A? So we need to invest in these relationships, right? Let's figure out, I think it's a little more challenging, but we have to figure out new ways to be innovative here, right? In terms of our internal customers. John, any thoughts or advice on how people do this?
Yeah, no, I think it's good. It's key to have a good collaboration with all these different departments. You know, it's really Treasury almost sits in the middle of everybody. In some instances, it seems like you have contact with almost, you know, every single one of these departments on a weekly basis here. So it's important to foster these relationships, you know, and really build that good internal, you know, internal communication and really, you know, make sure everybody's sort of on the loop on all Treasury related or other related items here.
Yeah, and just to note, we have more in-depth webinars about how to actually manage those relationships internally and externally. So if you're interested in more, we'll have it on future webinars, but also already have some content. John and I are happy to share our insights on that. And then we talked about your external partners, right, John? I think we already hit this one pretty well, those relationships. So let's see where we're at. And then also let's when we're assessing those relationships, right, a thing that I mentioned earlier, which I think is extremely important, we need to realign on expectations, right, with our external providers, and let's make sure that we're proactively communicating. Anything stand out here, John, that you want to
add? No, just, you know, important. Obviously, the better relationships you have with these partners, the more you can lean on them. You know, the more they can help you think through your existing processes, or even, you know, particularly abnormal times like now, really things that you can do to really improve your situation and make the situation easier on you.
All right, thank you, sir. So let's get into a little bit of how to do it. And then so pre and post. So collaborating with AP, and this is more important than ever post-corona, we need to facilitate visibility into not only our processes and internally share that visibility with everyone involved in the P2P process and before and beyond. We need to have visibility into that supplier activity. And let's be more careful now with our tone of our communications here. We need to invest in supplier relationship management. We need to look at managing our payment types and, of course, payment timing. And then before we were monitoring and managing KPIs that matter, you might have different KPIs that matter right now in the new next normal one. So I think those things are incredibly important. John, any thoughts you have as a practitioner, what you were able to do to collaborate with AP?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of things here, you know, just proactively making them aware of new payment types, ways to make actual AP processes a lot easier, you know, how to facilitate straight through payments and things like that. and really Treasury's role seems to be evolving and almost like, sitting in between AP and the banks and,
Yeah.
really having good visibility into what's happening in AP, even, some supply chain financing type activities and things like that. It seems like Treasury's more and more involved with supplier payment terms, all these aspects. It seems like, there's always a benefit of Treasury in being involved in these processes.
Yeah, I agree. And some of the ways I tell folks, just go and ask, and now you can send them a message or what are your biggest challenges that you face every day? Do you have the information you need? Hey, I was just on this webinar with these guys, Ernie Humphrey and John Paquette, and they were talking about some interesting things about accounts payable. Are we automating things? What are the challenges? What are some opportunities that we might be able to collaborate on, especially right now? And kind of, the same story with AR on the flip side. If you look at that cash conversion cycle, you want to facilitate visibility internally and externally. We want to remove information asymmetries, especially with our customers and customer activity. Of course, it's important to invest in CRM. We want to manage our receipt types. We want to see if we can manage our receipt timing and realign our expectations once again, right, with AR. So let's go ahead and look at investing in relationships. So I'm proud of some of this content because I've never seen it kind of laid out specifically by exactly how you do it. So when we look beyond Treasury, we need to remove any bias that we had, right, at looking at anyone as sales and overhead, and also looking at AP as overhead. I'm going to be honest here. I used to look at AP as overhead, so that's not the right mindset, right? And then we need to define how we can impact, right, sales, marketing, HR, and management success with our skill set, right? How do we facilitate that culture of data-driven decision making? How do we know what these areas need? Let's ask them, right? John, anything stick out with you in these first 2 points?
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely important for Treasury to, to cater to internal customers like this.
Yeah.
Really think through how they can add value to these processes here as well. And, I think these are two very valid points here.
Thank you. So again, how we can do that. Should have been 2 continued. How do we define and communicate the language needed to monitor and measure success, right? In a financial and non-financial context is now more value drivers are being defined by intangible assets. And so we're starting to look at things like customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction. And then we need to be more involved in data. We don't need to own the data, but we should be involved in setting the standards of how it's ensured, how data analysis is done as well. And so that's more important than ever. And then again, just ask them what you can do. We need clear lines of communication, and this is harder more than ever. And if someone saw me put this on a slide that knew me when I was in Treasury, they'd be like, I can't believe you said role playing, because I didn't like that, but now I think it's incredibly important. Anything stick out to you, John, in the last couple of slides we've gone through?
Yeah, they're all important points here, particularly the point about data. Really, Treasury. What's the valid data there? What's really the stuff that we need to be looking at here? What are the KPIs we need to be analyzing and things like that? I think there's definitely an important benefit that Treasury can lend to that process.
All right, thank you, John. So collaborating beyond work. Again, these are specific things that I wish I would have had when I was back in Treasury. So your bank partners, right? Let's have that call. If you don't have this understanding now, let's get even more of an understanding on the RAROC model of our partners, right? We need to educate your banks about your business. What's happening? What do I see, right? What are the risks? Let's be honest, and our priorities, and ask them what they need to meet your expectations, right? So you might have more expectations. Hey, you have an uncommitted line. Hey, I'm going to draw on that. You better be ready, right? Are you ready to invest in my relationship? And your customers understand how we impact the customer experience, and that can change. That could have changed, right, in the next normal. Collaborate with sales and find out how we can be more supportive of our customers, suppliers. Understand how we impact the supplier experience. Collaborate with sales, how we can be more supportive of our supply chain. So, John, any thoughts here on how to collaborate beyond work from Treasury?
Yeah, no, I think it's important to have a constant dialogue with all these departments. Particularly you mentioned the sales, how you can really impact customer relationships, supplier relationships, and things like that. Really understanding the needs of those departments and how they interact with their customers. What are the concerns and things too. So Treasury can definitely be a lot more effective in that capacity, I think.
Yeah, let me go ahead and ask you to put your Treasury practitioner hat back on, John. Is there any dimension of this where you thought you were particularly successful? And can you share with us like what you might have done? So is there a way that you engage bank partners or customers and suppliers that you found incredibly helpful to you when you were back in Treasury?
Yeah, I mean, I think that just to keep the lines of communication open, having constant meetings, constant check-ins with your
Yeah.
banking partners, I think is important. Getting something really recurring on the books, not waiting for, some sort of an opportunity or some sort of event to actually trigger those conversations, but having it be a constant dialogue, I think is a really effective mechanism for managing banking partner relationships too.
All right, thank you very much, sir. I'm going to go ahead and launch our final polling question, but I want to remind that if you interested in receiving CTP credit, you're going to have to stay on the line and complete our very quick post-webinar survey. Also want to remind you that we can still take your questions in the questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel. Also want to convey once again that John and I are more than happy to have conversations with you after the webinar is over on any of the topics that we discussed. So if you're not connected with John and I on LinkedIn, I strongly encourage you to do so. And I think I can speak for John as well. The much effort that you put into our relationship, you will get that back and more. So don't be afraid to ask, whether it's about the remote reality, how to connect with your Treasury peers, right? John and I are both longtime Treasury folks. To me, until I figured it out, it was hard for me to make connections with people that face the same challenges with me, right? How about I'm doing cash forecasting? How about I connect with someone that's doing cash forecasting in the same industry that I am, that has the same ERP system that I am, right? So those things can be incredibly powerful. So I'm going to go ahead and let you guys have about 5 more seconds, and then we're going to wrap things up with some closing thoughts. And again, we'll follow up with everyone regarding the questions that you had. And I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering the polling question. So just wanted to share with you a few things that we have out there and a few things that are coming on which I'm collaborating with TIS. Proud to do that. So I've really made a commitment to this remote reality resources. And so several blogs, right? How do you manage remote employees? How do you avoid mind-numbing virtual meetings? So hopefully our webinar today was not mind-numbing. Trying to get a laugh. I don't know if I made you laugh yet. I haven't been very entertaining today. Sorry, John. And then the art of email listening. Boy, I learned the hard way on this one. So some of the missteps I've made in my career were on email listening. So let's look for more of those resources, right, on my blogs and LinkedIn. And also want to share with you, if you're not already aware, that I'm absolutely thrilled to have TIS as a key partner in the first ever Treasury and Finance virtual conference, which we have on September 15th through the 17th. There's no cost to attend the conference other than your valuable time. I've been planning this conference with TIS for a long time, so this is not in response to the COVID outbreak. We wanted to make sure the technology was ready, and this is not what you see online all the time about a virtual forum. This isn't back-to-back webinars. That is not a virtual conference. This virtual conference recreates your experience at a live conference. No face-to-face, but you can set up video chats. You control your experience, right? That's incredible. You can network. The networking things here are incredible. We really don't have a noise-free network anymore, right? For Treasury professionals. Sorry, it just doesn't exist. I had hope for LinkedIn, but that's not the case. So on the post-webinar survey, you'll be able to let me know if you're interested in attending that event. And so again, I'm thrilled to have TIS as a strategic partner. Also, we just booked on my next webinar with TIS, so that is live on the Treasury webinars website. So go ahead, and John and I would love to have you once again, and please share what you've learned today with your colleagues, but also your network, right? And if you've gotten value out of our time together today. Once again, I want to take the minute to thank John for being my webinar partner today. John, I sincerely appreciate your time and your insight. So thank you so much, John.
Yeah, thank you too, Ernie. Thanks for having me.
And I also want to thank TIS, of course. Commitment to thought leadership, amazing and evident in everything that they do. And they actually let me do a lot of speaking. That's a little bit different than other webinars. I think that's why my doing webinars with my TIS partners is really exciting to me. And finally, before we wrap things up, again, everyone, please stay safe, healthy. And I really want to really let you know how much I appreciate the support that you give to Treasury webinars and myself. That really means a lot. And if there's anything that we can do to help you offer more value in any way during the remote reality, please let us go. Let us go. Let us know. Thank you so much, everyone. Make the rest of your day great.